If you mess this up, you could die. But if you do it right, you could be sleeping as snug as a bug in a rug. Today, I'm gonna tell you what I use as my winter camp sleep system. I'm also gonna tell you about a bit of a backup plan that's got me through some cold nights, and some words of caution when choosing your own sleep system. And my name is Ben, I'm a paddlehead. And before I get started, understand that everybody's different. Everyone requires a different level of insulation. So I recommend that you try your sleep system in a place where you can easily get to safety should your sleep system not be enough. Hypothermia is a very, very real risk that you don't wanna play around with. I've done a fair bit of winter camping over the past few years. I've been cold tenting in a 3-season tent in -20, and I've been hot tenting in a tent in -25. And they're all pretty fun experiences. Some of my winter sleep systems have included a cot, and some of them haven't. So let's start there, and we'll go from the ground up. Full disclosure, some of this gear I've bought myself, and some of it has been lent to me by Frontenac Outfitters. They've got a huge selection of winter camping and hot tenting gear, and you can browse it by using the link below. You're gonna hear me mention R-value throughout this video a couple times, and basically as a super brief explanation, the more R-value a piece of gear has, the more insulation it's gonna provide. When I go hot tenting, cots are massively helpful and pretty comfy, but they're not always necessary. But they kind of cradle you and keep you all in place so that your sleep system, like your sleeping pad, doesn't end up on the other side of the tent. One thing about hot tents is they don't have a floor. And as you're burning the stove inside of the hot tent, it melts the snow in the surrounding area. And after a few days, you could be exposing the ground. And it could be muddy, messy. So cots kind of help you get up off of that. But primarily, cots are just meant to get you up off the ground. The ground can really sap a lot of energy, a lot of heat out of your body, whereas the cot kind of separates you from the ground and helps prevent that. The next layer is a closed cell foam mat. Depending on how cold it is, you may want to use this on your cot as well. But if you're not using a cot, this is going to be your first line of defense on the ground. This is going to go directly on the ground, and this will add an R value of about 3, which is a really good boost of insulation. It will also offer protection for the next layer. Your sleeping pad, an insulated sleeping pad. Not just any sleeping pad, you want a little bit of insulation. When I'm choosing a sleeping pad, I like to choose a sleeping pad with an R value of at least 3 or more. If you can go for 4, I would go for 4, because you can use these in the summer. It's not like it's gonna make you overheat. It'll just add a little bit more weight to your pack than a normal sleeping pad, but I'm sure you can deal. And next is the sleeping bag. Sometimes I'll use a -7 bag, and sometimes I'll use a -18 bag. It's always good to try and use a bag that's rated for a little bit colder than what you're actually getting at. Here's my words of caution. When you're choosing a sleeping bag, understand that different manufacturers have different ratings. Some of them are just a survival rating, and some of them are actually a comfort rating. So it may say -7, and that means you could be surviving at -7, or you could be sleeping comfortably at -7. So this is again why I recommend testing out your sleep system before you go out into the woods with it. Make sure it works for you. Now, I'm a super hot sleeper. I pack a little furnace right in here, and this little furnace is actually powered by the likes that you give on this video. So why don't you keep me warm at night? Hit that like button for me. Thanks. Now, one of the problems I encounter as a hot sleeper is sometimes a sleeping bag is too hot for me and I end up sweating. And when you end up sweating, that will make you cold, especially if you sweat the bag out. When you sweat, you may be losing insulation in the bag. Chances are you will be. So for me, it's all about balance and layers. If I'm in a hot tent, I'll typically just use one sleeping bag. But if I'm in a 3-season tent or a cold tent, I will actually use a thin sleeping bag on the outside layer of my actual primary sleeping bag. The reason for this is as you're breathing throughout the night, the moisture from your breath will actually condensate on the side walls of the tent and will collect on your bag as well, which will kind of melt with your body heat and then get your sleeping bag a little bit damp. So if you have a very thin layer on the outside, it, for one, protects the primary insulation of your sleeping bag, your main sleeping bag, and 2, you can just shake it out in the morning, get some of those ice crystals off of that, and you can dry out that thin sleeping bag a lot easier than you would your primary sleeping bag. By the way, if you're interested in watching trips, reviews, or how-tos for adventure fishing, hit that subscribe button to be reminded of new videos that we put out. Something that I always consider as part of my sleep system is a base layer. I will actually wear a thin merino wool shirt or a thin polyester shirt to bed, and long johns and socks. And pro tip, this stupid stick. Pro tip, I recommend you put on a dry base layer before you get into your sleeping bag, just so you don't bring any moisture into that sleeping bag with you. Moisture is the enemy. But personally, I find I get a much better sleep with a base layer on, even in the fall. Just because I find that when that cold air creeps into your bag every once in a while, it kind of keeps you just a little bit awake. Doesn't let me get into a nice deep sleep. And then the other bonus is that if I get too hot in my sleeping bag, I can peel a layer off, and that base layer should have some of that sweat, and I'll get some of that moisture out of the bag. And that way I can help moderate my temperature inside the sleeping bag. Next up is a pillow. I would recommend a pillow with insulation. It does make a difference, but it's not absolutely necessary, as most sleeping bags nowadays have the whole mummy style hood and they're insulated, so it kind of helps, but insulation does help. And now for my backup plan, a down puffy jacket. I would highly recommend this piece of gear to anybody who's doing backcountry camping, as it packs down really small, it's ultra light, but it really brings in the warmth. We did a trip in Algonquin this year, and I didn't bring a sleeping bag that was quite warm enough. So halfway through one of the nights, I remembered I had my down puffy jacket, and I decided to put that on inside my sleeping bag, and an absolute game changer. I mean, it's basically just like putting on another sleeping bag. But it helped me get through the night, so I would highly recommend this piece of gear to anybody. That was a super fun trip through Algonquin, and I don't have much else to say about my winter camp sleep system, so if you want to watch something entertaining, I recommend watching that video right here. Or if you want to see something about winter camping, check out this one right here. We'll catch you later.